But if you make it taste good, you know, like...
Peace be with you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Today we are continuing our lecture on the philosophy of the Constitution, and we have finally made it to step 6, which is an imperfect step, but it was the best thing that men inspired by God could do at the time, and it's certainly not perfect. We have the U.S. Constitution. Now, we're not going to get into all the details. That would take too long. And the whole purpose of this lecture is to study the principles of the Constitution one by one. And it will be a long process because there are so many principles. But we have, the founding fathers, the creation of the Constitution was to replace the Articles of Confederation, which were imperfect, and to create a more perfect document, though it is still imperfect in its form. Now, the question I want to ask is, when was the Constitution of the United States of America destroyed? Because there's a lot of talk going on right now about how the Constitution's being destroyed and stuff. And there's different points to look at. And we have to look at the original step that took place that led to our current state today. The Constitution did not last 10 years without it being misunderstood, and the process of destruction began. And that was because there was an argument between two groups of people. There was the Jeffersonians and the Hamiltons. One led, of course, by Thomas Jefferson, and the other led by Alexander Hamilton. Hamiltonians, I suppose you would say. Thomas Jefferson wanted, and Jeffersonians want it to be understood that the United States was a republic of republics, with state sovereignty being supreme, with powers delegated to the federal government. Alexander Hamilton and the Hamiltonians wanted it to be understood that the states are subject to the federal government, and that the federal government reigns supreme. These arguments started during Washington's term in office, in which Alexander Hamilton convinced George Washington to go along with his line of thinking. I believe it was the creation of a bank, which thing the Jeffersonians opposed because they understood that it would lead to the enslavement of the nation. Well, Jefferson was angry, so he resigned from his position. And that was basically the beginning of the end of the Constitution. It was a very slow process of degradation over the years. The next step, 1801, a Supreme Court justice was chosen who was a strict follower of Hamilton's line of thinking, which then led to other branches off into the government and became so deeply embedded. Under this idea, the concept of explorers' rights, meaning basically that if you find land, that means you own it. Which of course led to the Trail of Tears, which resulted in lots of death. all of these constitutional subversions always lead to death, and from there it just keeps growing and growing. Finally, the official death of the U.S. Constitution occurred in 1861 with the Civil War, and they like to claim that the Civil War was about slavery. It wasn't. It was about the Union, or the North, and versus the South. The North was unconstitutionally putting taxes on the South. The South tried to redress it legally through Congress, but the North refused to budge, and so the South decided to secede, which under the original interpretation of the Constitution was legal, because the original interpretation of the Constitution, the states, the Union of States was a voluntary act, and that it was also voluntary. You could leave it as well. From that time, from 1789 to 1861, the United States was basically a union of states. And then from 1861, the Constitution was basically done away with, and a new secret Constitution replaced it. And under Lincoln, and it was the idea that that America is one indivisible land, and that the federal government reigns supreme over it. In fact, if you look on in the Senate or the House of Representatives, in Congress building, basically, they have these two poles called fasces, which is where we get the word fascism from, and it's what it is. It's a bundle of sticks bound together with a red cord wrapped around it with an axe. The Roman emperor someone would walk in front of the Roman emperor carrying the fasti, so that everybody could see it when the emperor would go around, and it represented that the Roman Empire was one, and that the emperor was supreme, and if you disobeyed the empire, you would be struck with the axe. And so, because why is this a symbol that has come into the United States? We stopped being a union of states from 1861 to 1970, and instead we became a nation called the United States of America, when there's actually no states involved in it anymore. That was done away with by Lincoln. If you will look at the Lincoln Memorial, you will see Lincoln sitting on a throne with his hands on top of two fascist sticks bundles. The great lie is that Lincoln saved the Republic and the Constitution. In fact, it was the exact opposite. He destroyed it and created a new one, basically, where the federal government reigns supreme. Now, this I learned recently. In 1863, there was a great think tank held by the thinkers of the day, and it was decided that in order to push this new agenda for this new nation, they would have to alter the dictionary. And so let me advise you: any dictionary that is younger than that is 1863 or younger than that is worthless. If my advice to you would be to go on a book site like Amazon or something like that and purchase for yourself an 1828 Noah Webster's dictionary. That is the best American dictionary ever, and it teaches the words as the founders originally understood them. And so if you want to understand the way things really are supposed to be in this nation, you need that 1828 dictionary understanding. Now, in the 1970s, there was a great economic crash in the United States. In order to get a boost out of it, basically what happened was that the federal government turned over basically itself to the federal banking system. And so from 1970 onward, we were no longer the United States of America nation, or rather empire is actually a more correct term. Empire meaning a collection of states or districts ruled by a strong, powerful central government. We ceased being the United States of America and became the Corporation of the United States of America. And so that's where we are today. The intent of the founders was that this was supposed to become a worldwide system. Instead it became corrupt, and it fell apart, and by 1861 it ceased to be. And now we are left to, it is impossible to fix this nation without understanding the original principles that the founders intended. And so that's the purpose of this lecture, is to teach those principles that were lost and purposely destroyed and altered, so that they can create the empire of the United States of America, which is now the Corporation of the United States of America. I leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Burger King. Get your burger's worth.